We don't buy it. Demanding fashion that's fair with global action plan.
Let's come together to use our collective voice on social media to demand fashion that's fair.
This next session, titled We Don't Buy It, will be run by a member of the Compassion and Not Consumerist team from Global Action Plan.
An environment charity which connects what's good for us and what's good for our planet.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the session We Don't Buy It, Demanding Fashion That's Fair. My name is Christina and I'm from the environmental charity Global Action Plan. And at Global Action Plan, we work to connect what's good for people with what's good for the planet. And today, for today's session, I'm also joined by Sabrina, and she's a member of our youth panel. So Sabrina, do you want to give a quick introduction?
Hi everyone, I am Sabrina and I'm a youth panel member with Global Action Plan. I'm currently studying environmental studies at university alongside this, but I previously worked in recycling and hospitality.
Fantastic. So I'm just going to share my screen. And firstly, I'd like you to all start thinking about what fashion means to you. And just to say, throughout the session, if you want to join in the conversation, by all means do so, and you can do that on Slido, so you can see the code on this screen. But yeah, so what does fashion mean to you? You know, because there's so many really positive things about fashion. It can be really creative, and it has the power to inspire and nurture imagination. And you know, you can kind of marvel at the skills which are involved in making a lot of garments. But unfortunately, the fashion industry is also saturated with exploitation, and it's the exploitation which we're going to start looking at the beginning of this session, and then we're going to move on to looking at how we can demand fashion that's fair. So firstly, to kick things off, we're going to start with the quick quiz, and this is just to provide some kind of context behind this exploitation. So grab a scrap piece of paper, and like I said, it's going to be pretty quick fire. It's multiple choice, and we're going to give you the question, and then we'll give you a few seconds to think of the answer, and then we're going to go straight in with what the correct answer is. Okay, so Sabrina, do you want to kick off?
Yes, so for question number 1, the fashion industry is the world's 5th largest polluter. Is that A, true, or B, false?
So the answer is false. It's actually the 2nd largest polluter in the world, not the 5th. But it's the 2nd, only after the oil industry. And the fashion industry emits more greenhouse gases than international flights and shipping combined. It's pretty eye-opening.
For question number 2, washing clothes made of synthetic materials like polyester releases 500,000 tons of microfibers into the ocean each year. This is the equivalent of how many plastic bottles? A, 1 million plastic bottles, B, 50 million plastic bottles, or C, 50 billion plastic bottles.
And just to give you a bit of information for this question, so in case you're not too sure about what microfibers are, so basically polyester is a material, and we find that in lots of our clothes. So around 60% of garments globally contain polyester, so it's a really common material, but it's synthetic, and it's made of plastic, right? And so that means that when you wash polyester, these tiny plastic fibers are released, and they find themselves into the ocean, and that's what they're called, microfibers. And the problem with microfibers is because they're made of plastic, they don't decompose. So that's a bit of background. And so we're asking, out of all these microfibers, what's the equivalent of how many plastic bottles? And the answer is C. It's equivalent to 50 billion plastic bottles, which is a crazy amount.
For question 3, how many litres of water does it take to make 1 cotton shirt? A, 27 litres, B, 270 litres, or C, 2,700 litres?
And the answer is C. It takes 2,700 litres of water to make one t-shirt. And to show you a bit more information, we've got a video and it's called Fashion's Dirty Secret, and it was on BBC Three with Stacey Dooley. So we're just going to show a clip from this.
Large bodies of water are disappearing because cotton is so thirsty. Before I started travelling for this documentary, I knew almost nothing. I was fairly familiar what went down from a human perspective, the human cost, but the environmental cost, yeah, I wasn't informed at all. Hello, how are you? I'm Stacey, nice to see you.
Thank you.
Can we borrow you for 5 minutes? What have you been buying?
My mum bought this. She bought a jacket.
So show me what you've got in your bag. Ah, so a hoodie.
Yeah.
And is it cotton?
Yep.
This is 100% cotton. Brilliant, interesting. So, how much water, Johnny, do you think has gone in to grow in the cotton necessary to make this jacket?
Probably about 800.
800?
Yeah.
70 liters, 20, 30 liters.
20 or 30 litres?
Yeah.
Growing the cotton
Yeah.
to make that jacket
Yeah.
will have taken 10,330 litres of water. 4,580 litres of water. 10,800 litres of water just to grow the cotton to make that jacket.
I can't believe this.
Sorry, that's actually blown my mind. Oh my god. It's 13 years for one person. It's just
Goodness, for one
ridiculous, right? 24 years of drinking water for one person.
24 years.
That's wild, right?
That's wild. It's crazy.
So moving on to question 4. How many hours does a typical garment worker work per week? A, 46 hours, B, 76 hours, or C, 96 hours?
And the answer is C, 96 hours. So garment workers typically work 12 to 14 hours per day, 7 days a week. And around 80% of garment workers are women. They're compelled to work extremely long hours in order to supplement their basic low earnings towards a level where they can support themselves and their families.
Question 5. In a UK survey, what percentage of 11 to 21-year-old girls said that they have seen adverts online that have made them feel pressured to look different? A, 24%, B, 44%, or C, 54%?
And the answer is C, 54%. And a few more facts is there's 80% of girls this age have thought about changing their appearance, and over a third won't post a photo of themselves on social media unless they change aspects of their appearance. And this increases as girls get older, unfortunately. So, as we've learned from the quiz, the fashion industry, unfortunately, is full of exploitation. And I've split the different chains of exploitation into 3 categories. So there's environment, workers, and mental well-being. So you might ask yourselves, what can we do about this? So lots of people focus on the individual actions we can take, and you might do some of these yourselves. So for example, you could buy less new things because the environmental impact of a piece of clothing is made, the most environmental impact is made at the extraction and production stage. So if you stop buying things which are new, or at least massively reduce the amount of new things you buy, this would have a massive impact on your personal fashion footprint. So you think, right, how can I do this? There's options of buying secondhand. And as you can see, you've got Michaela Cole here in Oxfam's Secondhand September campaign. So Oxfam are real big advocates for buying secondhand. You could borrow clothes from friends, organise clothes swaps. And also what I think is really important is asking yourself questions. So having a real think about, if you're about to buy something, you're thinking about, do I really need this? Will buying this change my perception of myself? Will it boost my self-esteem? Or would maybe hanging out with friends, for example, maybe that would actually cheer me up more? So, asking yourself these questions. And then also another thing you could do is value what you already have and take really good care of the clothes you have. So for example, if you get a hole in it, rather than just discarding it, looking at ways to repair it. So Sabrina, are there any of these kind of things which you've adopted yourself to try to live more sustainably? And if so, how have you found doing it?
So about 2 years ago, I decided to stop buying from fast fashion brands. It took probably a year to completely eliminate them, because in the first year discovering how bad brands are or which ones are bad. So that was the first challenge, but it was really exciting when I slowly did start buying less and less, and it made me think and look at my closet, and now I only ever buy something when I actually really need a particular item. It's really good for the bank account, but it's also really good for your mental well-being, because you don't constantly feel really stressed about buying the next thing. And most items of clothing don't really go out of fashion that quickly. But I do always look to buying from charity shops, especially in cities, they're really great. Even eBay, Depop, borrowing from siblings, if you're at school with friends. But yeah, it's just really important that you look at what you really need, and whether it's with items of clothing that you no longer have in your closet, that you no longer need, who could you give them to?
Some very good strong tips there, and that's really great to hear kind of how much you've done and kind of how much you've kind of considered these individual actions, because taking these individual actions are really important. And as the saying goes, change starts from within, and it often has this ripple effect. However, it is important to note that people, and often the media, for example, really heavily focus on what the individual can do, and they put a lot of responsibility on the individual to make all these changes. But then it kind of begs the question, what are brands doing? And actually, if you kind of look at this in more depth, you realize that brands actually often make it harder for individuals to achieve these sustainable changes. For example, it's one thing, if I thought, right, I'm going to buy less new clothes, okay? And you make that decision. But then actually brands and advertising make it really difficult for individuals to achieve this, because they bombard us with pressure to buy stuff all the time. So at Global Action Plan, we wanted to look more into this. So last year we started a movement called I Don't Buy It. And you might notice it has a very similar name to today's session, but it's slightly different. And I'm going to come on to that in a bit later, why that is. But for the movement, we wanted to look at how much pressure individuals get bombarded with. And we found out that according to a social media management platform, the average Instagram user will see one advert every 3 to 4 posts. So to demonstrate this immense pressure to buy and the sheer scale of advertising, we asked young people to record everything they were told to buy on Instagram in 10 minutes. And here's a short clip of a couple of the posts. So when you look at that, you think, no wonder we feel the pressure to buy all this stuff that we don't actually need. And this is such a problem because advertising makes us focus on, getting more money and getting more possessions. And this doesn't actually improve our well-being, but it instead makes us more likely to feel worse about ourselves. And to demonstrate this, we spoke to some secondary school children to find out, secondary school young people to find out their experience, and this is what they told us.
So Samuel from Lewisham, who's 14, said it's a huge pressure for people my age to have to afford new clothes, shoes, cosmetics, and it really affects them mentally because they think I won't be popular if I don't have this. Mariam, who's also 14, said, all these adverts that are showing I should buy something or do something to make me perfect. It does make people feel weird. Me, I look at it, I know it's not real, but there's still in the back of my head, I'm thinking, what if? And Isla, aged 14, a lot of adverts damage people's self-esteem, and things like adverts about beach body ready or even adverts for perfume, they portray bodies in a very unrealistic way.
So this is all really eye-opening, and we saw that even, say, in lockdown, when for once you might think, right, brands aren't going to bombard me with this pressure because, you know, we're not going anywhere, we're just stuck at home. But then actually what we saw were that brands and brands changed their advertising tactics, and then they put pressure on us to see the home, so our own homes, as a place to look good. So we're up against these, you know, really quite sneaky tactics by these really powerful brands. So if we go back to those three chains of exploitation, the environment, workers, and the mental well-being, it begs the question, you know, who is actually benefiting from all this exploitation? And the answer is the fashion billionaires that own these brands. So throughout all of these chains of exploitations, while wages are low for workers and they're working in these really poor working conditions, many fashion billionaires and their brands report profits of millions, if not billions of pounds. So, for example, this shows the net worth of the owners of Topshop, Zara, H&M and Boohoo. And we're talking, you know, huge amounts of money, 66 billion pounds. And when you look at that, just huge amounts of wealth, you realise how unfair it is that the people who are actually making the clothes that make these men rich, they're not even being paid a living wage.
So here we can see that the global fashion industry is worth approximately $2.5 trillion, which in pounds is 1.9 trillion pounds. The top 8 global fashion companies all made over $1 billion, so about 760 million pounds in profit in 1 year. And in contrast to that, we can see that an Ethiopian garment worker earns a base wage of $26 a month, which is £20 a month in the pounds, and the minimum monthly living wage in Ethiopia is about $110, which is only £83 a month.
So, you know, this really is eye-opening, and it really shows the scale of inequality we're dealing with and how just unfair it all is. So we need to hold the fashion billionaires and their brands accountable. For example, Boohoo. So you may have seen in the news recently, so during the whole of lockdown, it was discovered that in factories in Leicester in the UK, there's an estimated 10,000 garment workers working for Boohoo who are being paid £3.50 an hour. And if you compare that to the national minimum wage, which is £8.72, you know, you think, what's going on? And then you contrast that to the slide before when the owners, you know, has got a net worth of £1 billion. And also there was reports of these workers not only being paid, you know, so much lower than the minimum wage, but they're working in back-breaking work and really hot and cramped conditions and not wearing good enough PPE. So, you know, it's all these really awful working conditions.
And H&M was called out for greenwashing because it released its conscious fashion collection. Greenwashing is a really common issue that you find in these big brands. It's a tactic that helps companies appear to be more sustainable than they actually are. And therefore the consumer or us is led to believe that we're making a positive impact or we're buying something positive, when in reality that isn't the case. And we also have to look at these big brands like H&M, where they release a very, very small sustainable collection. That's, their eco collection, but we can look at the quantity of clothing that they're churning out each year. And is that really a sustainable business model? And the answer to that is normally no.
And you've got companies like Urban Outfitters. So some of you may have heard that when the pandemic hit, lots of clothing companies just completely cancelled their orders. So there was millions of pounds worth of orders just cancelled. They basically just said, right, we're closing our doors, and then boom, all these orders cancelled. So that meant they left hundreds of thousands of Bangladeshi garments workers with no income and no safety net to fall back on in such a awful time. And so Urban Outfitters are one of the an example of one of the clothing brands who just completely cancelled their orders and have not paid the garment workers the money they're owed.
And then here we have Brandy Melville, which is a very popular shop for young students, especially young girls. And this is an app called Good On You. So Good On You basically shows the ethical sort of rating of different brands. So you can look up Nike or H&M on there too. But this one we can see that Brandy Melville has not provided sufficient information to even give it a rating. And that leads to another problem, which is that we don't know anything about a brand if we don't have their information. So transparency is so important to helping us fight fast fashion. And it is also a really important step to accountability.
So a message to all these fashion billionaires and brands: can't give us fashion that's fair? We don't buy it. We don't buy it that you can't pay fair wages to your workers, and we won't buy it if you keep exploiting people and planet. So why have we changed from I don't buy it to we don't buy it? It's because we want to stress the importance of coming together and using our collective voice. So I really like this picture, which emphasizes the power of collective action. Because often things can feel too big to tackle when you think about what you can do just as an individual. But then when we come together and use collective action, we become so much more powerful, as the picture shows. And when you look back in history, great change was brought about by collective action. When you think about the civil rights movement or the suffragettes and the suffragists, where women gained the right to vote, they're all great examples of collective action and people coming together. So at Global Action Plan, we're really keen to create a fashion campaign which calls out these fashion billionaires and brands and demand that they give us fashion that's fair. We want to hold these fashion billionaires to account, and we'd love to hear your ideas and be inspired by your ideas in doing this. So what we'd like you to do, we're going to have a quick creative session, and we'd like you to create your own social media campaign. So you could use the hashtag WeDontBuylt, or you can think of your own hashtag or your own name for it. And what we want to do for you to do is to ultimately demand fashion that's fair.
So we could start by looking at what brand you might target. Would it be a really big brand like H&M and Boohoo that we've just spoken about? What issue is it that you want to focus on to tackle? So is it equal pay or fair pay, or is it an issue on plastics and the environment? And then thirdly, what do you want to say to them? What's your demand? How are you going to ask them to change, basically? And then fourth, which social media platform would you target them on? Do you want to write them emails? Do you want to share posts on Twitter or on Instagram? And then for number 5, How would you engage others in your campaign? Would you want to talk about it to friends and get a group of together of you in school? Would you want to share it through the hashtag? And then for number 6, which influencers would you want to support the campaign? So you might already follow some people on Instagram that really inspire you with what they're doing. And that's a great idea to reach out to them.
And like we said, we'd love to be inspired and hear your ideas. So if you'd like to share them, if you go to the Slido website and enter in the code which is on the screen, and then you can share your ideas on that. And then if we give you about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and I'll show you then an example of a movement and a social media campaign which created positive action. And also just to say, get those creative juices flowing, because often, especially when it comes to engaging others in your campaign, the more creative and the more interesting your social media campaign, the more people who are going to jump on board. So yeah, we'll give 10 minutes to do that. Okay. Hi everyone, and I hope you've had a chance to think about creating your own social media campaign. I'm just gonna look on the Slido. Some of you have taken part. So we've got Izzy saying that they'd target Boohoo and demand that they pay their staff fairly, and they try and get some celebrities and some models to back my campaign. So that's a really good idea, and use it, because obviously you've got celebrities and models. They often have a big following, so when you get them on board, if I post an Instagram post, it's not going to be seen by as many people compared to a celebrity. So yeah, that's sounds like a good idea, Izzy, getting some kind of influencers on board with your campaign. Then you've got someone else saying, I'd go for H&M and try get them to stop greenwashing and to admit that they're on a journey but not there yet, and be honest about where they want to go. I'd be kind and understanding rather than demanding. So that's really interesting tactic as well. So it's and it is true, you could it's good that H&M are making these changes, but I think, like this person has said, it's about making sure that they're honest and that they're not coming out with their marketing tactics kind of selling the idea that they're just sustainable, full stop. So yeah, I think that's really good point, that kind of getting them to be more honest, but then equally having that as understanding as well, showing understanding and being kind, I think are really good points. You've got some more people targeting Boohoo and Pretty Little Thing. Some other people saying we need to get models to speak out. Someone else saying, notice how many of the owners of these companies are old white men. And so that's another, you could argue it's also a feminist issue as well. And when you look at all the 80% of garment workers are women, and often women of colour. So there's a lot of other social issues which come into play as well. So that's other people saying they're not doing enough. So yeah, we've got some really interesting points here. Just having a look. There was someone saying that it seems like only some of my class care, and they're not sure how to get people to care. And I think a really good starting point is having these discussions and talking to your classmates, because often you can be quite surprised that actually people do care, but you think because people don't really talk about it, it's quite easy to think that other people don't care. But then actually, when you start talking to others, and it's kind of that idea of coming together again, bringing in that collective action, you realize that lots of people do care, but because people don't talk about it, or you don't see it so much, it's easy to think that others don't care. So I definitely say start having those conversations.
Just to add on that one as well, different things interest different people. So it might be the environment for one person, and it might be the mental well-being of another. So just speaking to them and finding out which issue it is that they engage with, that will help as well.
That's a really good idea. So I'd like to also share with you an example of a social media campaign whereby people have come together and used their collective voice, like we've been speaking about. So as I spoke about earlier, when the pandemic hit, lots of clothing companies cancelled millions of pounds worth of orders, and therefore they showed no concern for the garment workers, which meant that these garment workers were left with no income and no safety net to fall back on. So a non-profit organisation called Remake, they thought, like we've been saying, they thought, right, it's not on, we don't buy this. And they created a social media campaign called #PayUp. And this exposed the brands that had just cancelled their orders and hadn't paid for their orders. And it was anchored in a petition. And it was, asking these brands to pay up and give the garment workers what they're owed. So lots of people added their voice to this campaign. And as a result, you had massive brands like Levi's and Gap and Nike, and they all paid up after cancelling their orders. So This is a really good example of the power of coming together and using our collective voice to demand a more fair world. And as we come into the end of the session, I just want to end with a vision statement of the world we want. So we want a world where fashion's production volume fits within planetary boundaries, where workers are paid a living wage in their country, and where fashion marketing celebrates the amazing things the people wearing the clothes achieve, and not just how they look in them.
And an action or pledge for the audience to take. You can choose a brand and demand or ask that they give us fashion that's fair. You can call them out on social media and encourage others, like your school friends, to do the same, so you magnify your impact. If you're unsure of how to do this, there is a great website called Fashion Revolution, and if you go to their page and go to their Get Involved page, then you can find out more information on how to do so.
And a call for world leaders. Please ensure that billionaires do create a fairer future. Don't allow companies to get away with not disclosing the factories they use. Ensure transparency and accountability for the lives and ecosystems they impact. So that is the end of our session, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I also hope that you enjoy the rest of the Youth Climate Summit. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.